It's in the name, progressive left. Progressive. They're supposed to go somewhere. They're supposed to change something. Something is supposed to progress forward. It always must. And I've talked about this before. I've described in the past the progressive left as something that never has enough of the current situation, never feels satisfied with the status quo or any approximation thereof. There always needs to be more. And if you give them an inch, they don't just take a mile, they take leagues. At least that's the way it's been looking in recent years. And I think an acquaintance of mine put it perhaps much more succinctly in describing the progressive left as a hammer in search of a nail. It's that classic issue of when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But the progressives add an extra layer to that. They're still in search of nails. Everything becomes a nail, but they need to find it first. And they have a very, very big nail indeed right now. But before we walk ourselves through that, it's not as if the progressives in the past had no tasks or goals that might have been somewhat reasonable. If you look at history, human civilization, for the most part, we, as in human beings, have lived wretched, horrific lives. Brutish, short, painful. It's only been in very recent years, perhaps decades, not even a century, where this hasn't been the case to a large degree. And the ultimate comfort, the best of the best, that's right now. You wouldn't think that if you were to look out at the world, or turn on the television, or watch a video on YouTube, but the best of the best is the current year. In terms of technology, comfort, things available. Imagine most of the span of humanity, if you will, the vast, vast majority, tens of thousands of years. No progress, no technological innovation, no medicine, no comfort, no shelter, nothing. Year after year, decade after decade, century after century, millennium after millennium, just the same shit. Slowly but surely, civilization takes off. But it is a long marathon, is it not? And it's taken quite some time to get where we are right now. But if you were to look at that picture and compare it with the current picture, the picture of the current year, you might be led amiss. Because then you might think that things are okay. They're not perfect. They never are. And they never were, more to the point. But in recent years and decades, we have been fortunate to experience slow but incremental progress on a number of fronts. So the progressive mind, nothing is ever good enough. If everyone were living in a mansion, but the richest of the rich were living in palaces filled with untold acres of forests and fields, then that would be an issue. They would be on their feet, arguing and screaming about how poor people only live in 5-bathroom and 4-bedroom mansions, and it's just not fair. Now, that's the ideological element here, obviously. I don't claim that everyone's an ideologue here. There are plenty of opportunists as well. I don't even think people like the so-called Reverend Al Sharpton, probably the biggest race hustler there's been for decades and decades, really believes the things he says. He makes his money off of stirring up racial tension. That's what he's done for years. I remember him from the 90s and the 80s. It's his bread and butter. But ideologues do exist, and they're the ones who think that things are not overall okay. Not perfect, but okay. No, they think that things are worse than ever. Objectively, they would claim. Now, when I hear something like this, and I've heard people argue that with me, that things right now are worse than they've ever been, I wonder if they've ever opened a history book. I wonder if they know anything about human existence. 1349. say the height of the bubonic plague, otherwise known as the Black Death, wiped out a third of Europe. People starving, corpses in the streets. You'd be lucky if you survived a couple of years in that environment. Of course, nobody had the time or energy to protest. They were too busy trying to survive, if that. Infant mortality at rates beyond your comprehension. You name it. But that apparently was better than what I've been told is the worst time possible to live in. Maybe they were being hyperbolic. But even if they weren't, the fact of the matter remains that things are okay. They're not perfect. So let's start with that premise. Things are okay. And because progressives need to progress to somewhere, although it's never told exactly where, they need to do something. So the world is up in arms. The latest clarion call is the call of insanity. It's its own version of the call of Cthulhu. Don't just defund the police, which is itself insane. Dismantle the police. Link in the low bar, by the way. Yes, indeed, the City Council of Minneapolis has thought about this and agreed that the police should be dismantled. Now, I don't think this is actually going to come to pass, but imagine that. No police whatsoever. Are there problems with the police in the United States? Absolutely. There are problems with the police. But I think it should also be borne in mind that there's a lot of crime in the United States. There are not as many problems with the police in most European countries. But there's also a lot less crime. The United States has more crime than any other developed country in the world. In some cases combined. More violent crime, specifically. Now, I'm not saying that justifies police misconduct, but where there's more violent crime, vastly more, you have to expect that there's going to be more police engagement. And if there's more police engagement, there are going to be more problems. And here's the question. Defund the police. Dismantle the police in Minneapolis. Okay. Who needs the police the most? The black community is a community where most of the crime in the United States takes place. Most of the violent crime in the United States takes place within the black community. It would stand to reason, therefore, that they need the most help from the police. So if you defund the police and dismantle the police, you're going to get probably even more crime, even more murder, even more problems. This is the degree of not thinking things through that we see on display here. But what I really want to talk about is complete lack of the teleological here. For example, again, defund the police to what end? Dismantle the police to what end? This idea, which they're not explicit about, but nonetheless resides in many of the statements they make, the progressive left, the rioters, the protesters, that by destroying something, the aftermath of that thing will be better. It very, very rarely is. Does anyone think that the buildings that have been looted, the businesses burnt down, that's a better thing? Communities robbed of supplies, groceries. There's a non-thinking element here. There are no concrete demands. There's nothing they want other than vagaries. The world isn't perfect, but it has improved immensely over the last few centuries and far, far more rapidly than ever in the previous few decades. And then they'll also justify it by saying, well, you need to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Now, I'm reminded of a story about the English writer George Orwell. Famously wrote Animal Farm in 1984. It might be apocryphal, it might not be, I have no idea. I don't think it matters whether or not the story is real because the content is so on point. It's claimed in the story that George Orwell is debating a communist, and specifically a pro-Stalinist, in the aftermath of many of the horrific crimes that took place in the Soviet Union, including, above all, the Holodomor, the man-made mass starvation that took place in Ukraine in the 1930s. And the communist finally concedes it, well, you do need to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And Orwell says, allegedly, where's your omelet? So where is the omelet here? What are they trying to progress to? You see, it used to be that progressives had somewhere to progress to. whether you agree with them or not. Abortion rights for women, gay marriage, take your pick. Whatever you think about those issues, it was something that they could progress towards. And what now? No police. That's actually a regression. For most of humanity's existence, we had no police. So they actually want to regress to a state where there is no law enforcement. A rather recent innovation, I might say. There are many problems, but this is the core of the problem. These people don't even know what they want. So, this is my concern. They've run out of things to progress towards. And when they run out of things to progress towards, they've given us ample evidence to suggest they will regress. They will destroy institutions, society, civilization, if need be, all in the name of their insanity. And it will be left to sane people to pick up the pieces if they can. Does anyone else see where this is going? There's no place left to progress. All we can hope for is slow, incremental change on a number of fronts. Destroying things generally doesn't do that. So I hope I'm wrong here. I hope that they haven't run out of ideas completely, but it sure sounds that way. They have no demands. They're just shouting vagaries. And with nothing left to go to progress to, the only thing I can see, and the evidence they've shown me, is they wish to progress towards destruction. Well, gentlemen, you have a pleasant week, and if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. As always, may the gods watch over you. Take care. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.